And thanks, ICAT, for bringing us together. So today we're going to be talking about the SOVA IT ARC render farm. And with me today, I have Siobhan Saxon, MFA student. Siobhan is all the way at my left, or your right. Siobhan's a MFA student in the Creative Technologies program at SOVA. Rodney Kimbangu, also an MFA student. Yeonhee Erin Chun. I'm not so good with, I had her say the name for me and then I'm getting it wrong, but MFA student at SOVA. She'll say her name properly for us, thank you. Thomas Tweaks Weeks, can you raise your hand? He'll be speaking in a moment. Robert Sutledge. So Thomas is from the IT, and he's the Director of Technologies, Futures, and Community Advocacy, which is such a cool title. And Dr. Robert Sutledge is a computer scientist, a computational scientist at ARC, Advanced Research Computing. So when I say ARC, it means Advanced Research Computing. And that's me, Meredith Drum. There's some essential team members that are not here today. Well, actually, we have two of them here in the audience, but they're not up on stage. Dungsu Chao, who is the Director of Technology at SOVA. Actually, I'm not entirely sure if that's his correct title, but something in that, that realm. Dungsu was very essential to this process because without him, we couldn't have got the proper rendering process the way that we wanted it done. So he really did a lot there. He wasn't able to join us. Dr. Ben Knapp, who is here, brought us all together. So we're really happy to have Dr. Knapp here with us. Thank you. And then Fat Nagoyan, who earned his MFA here in Creative Technologies from SOVA, is now working in Richmond at Vital Studios. He's the Director of Talent Development. And Thomas Tucker, Associate Professor in SOVA, who is here somewhere. Where are you, Thomas? Yay. So what is a render farm and why do we need it? Well, my students will tell you that it really helps in terms of getting the renders done in a timely fashion. The render farm is much, much faster than their laptops. It's a little bit faster than our new computers in the basement of the library. Actually, it's a good bit faster, but those are pretty powerful. So these, the render farm that we're using on ARC really speeds up our students' process, allows them to iterate more frequently and see mistakes and catch them, and generally bring up the quality of their animations. And it also keeps them from destroying their machines, because if they're rendering all the time, it wears down their machines. So it's really a big gift for us to be able to use it. This is from Wikipedia. A render farm is a high-performance computer system, a computer cluster built to render computer-generated imagery, typical for film and television visual effects. The first render farm, at least as far as Wikipedia could tell me, was made at Autodesk, and it was made when they had to render a promotional called The Boardroom. Has anybody seen The Boardroom from the 90s? It's a pretty silly animation. But they were trying to do this on a deadline, and they had to use a, let's see, this is in 1990, and they used a room filled with compact 386 computers configured to do the rendering. At the time, the system wasn't networked, so each computer had to be set up by hand to render a specific animation sequence. The rendered images could then be harvested via a rolling platform to a large format optical storage drive, then loaded frame by frame to a Sony CRV disc. So, and this right here, this is the guy that you're seeing here is, I think that's Jamie Clay. So the Autodesk technician assigned to manage this early render farm, Jamie Clay, had a regular habit of wearing farmer's overalls. And the product manager for the software joked that what Clay was doing was farming the frames, and in that moment, he named the collection of computers a render farm. So there you go. Kind of a fun history there for that. I love computer history. So we're really happy to have the ability to do this here. We didn't have this before. We didn't have the opportunity. We didn't really have a proper render farm, and a lot of good animation schools do have them. So bringing this to Virginia Tech SOVA was really important. So I'm going to turn it over to our students. There's 3 students now. So Siobhan's going to start us off. And let me give you the clicker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Siobhan. Shivain Saxena. I'm a student in Meredith's 3D animation class, and the project I'm going to show you today was for one of our class, for a class that I'm in. So my project is called Maya.exe is not responding. And it's supposed to be a study in environment building to catch the feeling and frustrations of softwares crashing and destroying our work, which I think we should be all pretty familiar with.
Would you keep your mic at your mouth?
Okay.
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Because then the people online can't hear you.
All right. So it's supposed to be a cyber/technical environment with bright textures and glitch effects. All right. So when I was first starting out with the project, I rendered one frame from it to see how it was coming along. And this is that one frame that I rendered on my own device. And this took me, with see all the grainy particles around, this took me around a whole minute to render this one still frame. This is rendered on the render farm. This is around 70 frames, and it took me less than a minute to do it on the render farm. That is right there. The blobs that you see, those are supposed to be electrical sparks, which did not render well on Arnold. But good thing about the render farm is that it allowed me to catch that. So, so I knew it was not rendering properly. If I was doing this on my own device, it would have taken me super long to catch that and like do iterations of it. So render farm allows for quick iteration. It's amazing. I love it. So this is a play blast. So this is not rendered. It is just a play blast of the sparks after I fix them. Sorry, my mask is just slipping. OK. So yeah, this is a video of the play blast of the sparks after I fixed them. And this is a still render with the sparks fixed. So I noticed that the sparks weren't working with Arnold. So I had to switch over to Maya hardware. But these are now fixed. So that's all thanks to the render farm for allowing me to see that they weren't rendering how I wanted them to render. So yeah, I think render farm is a wonderful, wonderful tool that we have access to now. And I think it's wonderful because it allows for quick iterations and just helps you refine your ideas over and over again, which I think is a really important aspect of being an artist. And yeah, it's amazing. Thank you. I'll hand it over to, who is it? Is it Rodney now?
Thank you, Shivain. May I have the clicker?
Yep.
Thank you much. Hi, everyone. My name is Rodney Kimbangu. I am an interdisciplinary artist and one of Dr. Drum's students. So when I started my journey as a student here, I had a conversation with Professor Drum, and she told me about the opportunity to render our scenes using the art computer. And so when she said it, if you looked at my eyes, you could see the sparkles in my eyes because it takes a long time to render anything. And so when she said it, I thought, I will finally win the game of playing the cat and mouse with the processing power game. And so I was just like, okay, when I take your class, I'll make sure that I'm ambitious enough to dream big and create complex scenes because I know I'll be able to render the scenes from the class. And so for the class, we had to make a few animations. And because of these servers, I could really dream big and have complex scenes and have clouds and intricate textures and intricate skin materials. And so, you know, when we render frame by frame. So every animation has 24 images in a second, but we render every frame. And so if you have to have a 1 second animation, we have to render 24 frames. So when we render stuff, we kind of measure the minute it takes, the time it takes to render anything from the computer. It's just like a cinematographer flexing and saying, yeah, you know, I shot that scene using an Arri Alexa. So for me, what happened was the photos that you see, pretty much every one of them took me 20 minutes to render from my computer. And from the computers in the library, that took around 9 minutes for one frame. Now, because I had to render around 1,000 frames, if I had to render the 1,000 frames with 20 minutes for each, it would have taken me 20,000 minutes on my computer. And if I put that in hours, it's 333.333 hours. And in days, that's 13.8 days non-stop of rendering. So by day 3, I think my computer would have already broken down. And so with the render farm, I was able to render everything from these animations. So from this animation and the animation that's gonna come after, I was able to render everything in around 10 hours. And all of that would have not been possible had it not been for the render farm. And so I'm just really grateful that I'm really grateful that I'm able to see the mistakes that I'm making as I'm rendering my animations, because if it was from my computer only, I would have not been able to even see the mistakes I'm making. So I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to use the render farm and render my scenes. So I'll pass it to Aaron.
Hello, my name is Yanni Erin Chang, and I'm a 3D modeler and an animator. So this is the squirrel that I modeled, textured, and rigged for an animation project in Dr. Drum's 3D animation class. So these are some of the images that were rendered through Arc Render Farm. And my animation project is about the squirrel characters using bow and arrow to hunt the giant boar you can see in the middle. And I like animating action scenes because they're very dynamic and it's very fun to do. But since I have so many shots of action scenes, it would render, like I would have a lot of frames to render, and it would take a lot of time to do it. So all I had to do was upload the scene files on the Arc Render Farm and just click on Launch Render. Then I go to sleep. Then I wake up in the morning, and boom, everything was rendered and ready to go. And that is such a beautiful moment to have in the early morning. So Render Farm is definitely saved a huge amount of time for me. So I had a little one problem though with the Render Farm, but the fault was actually on my end because if I remember, there actually is some problems, but Meredith and IT staff really helped me fixing the problem where Arc Render Farm couldn't render my scenes. So, and it turns out that my Maya scene files had some errors in it. So I saved them into new scenes and then uploaded them onto the website. Then it just started working perfectly. So the next video is a turntable animation of my squirrel character. And this was actually rendered on my laptop, but there's a slow motion scene that you'll see later that was rendered through Arc Render Farm. And I used a longbow reference, which is a traditional English longbow practice. So that's a slow motion scene that was rendered through Arc Render Farm. And typically 3D animation is 24 to 30 frames per second, but this was 400 frames per second. That would be thousands of images that I had to render. So Arc Render Farm did a great job rendering that particular slow motion scene, which only took 20 minutes to render. And that would take like a day on my laptop. And the next video is a few clips that were rendered through Render Farm as well. Yeah, so that's all for my animation, and thank you for watching.
Thomas, do you want to come up too? Just so you're up here already. Thomas Weeks. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Bob Sutledge. I work in advanced research computing. I have to say, I love my job. I'm a computer and data scientist, and day to day, I see many, many different things. Generally, that's in the science. In this case, it's in the arts. This is kind of new for me, and I have to say, this is kind of the prettiest set of pictures I've ever seen in my career, and this is just absolutely awesome. This project, for me, is about Open On Demand. Open On Demand is a way to provide access to HPC resources for people that are maybe not computer scientists. So the idea is we're doing a really bad job at delivering HPC to people that aren't familiar with the command line. Sorry. HPC is high performance computing. In this case, it's our render farm. Okay, so through just changing how we present our HPC resources, we can give access to people in a different way that makes it accessible and reachable. And so that's what we're doing with On Demand. So we're producing web-based tools to allow access to our HPC. And in some cases, we're just scripting jobs. So we're putting some automation behind the scenes that many users don't have to see because they're doing the same thing over and over. Where I sit, I'm kind of in this corner here, my job is really about this. It's about bringing people to HPC that are beginners and then facilitating their progression from beginner to intermediate and eventually advanced, hopefully. So we have a lot of goals for Open On Demand. I've got a few up here. But really, it's sort of the same theme. It's bring new and different users to HPC that's enabling them to do science and arts that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And you know, something that I heard last time we met was by having faster rendering, I was able to be more creative. And that's like the hallmark of, wow, that's exactly why we're doing this. Thomas?
They put me last because I got a lot of stuff. So Thomas Weeks, everyone just calls me Tweaks. About 30% of my job is doing special projects like this for IT. Most of my time is the Virginia Cyber Range. But it's a lot of really fun stuff. This is kind of the history of what we started back in 2017. Ben Knapp called IT, Dr. Midgift, said, hey, can we do this? He said, well, we think so. So they threw me on it. And I'd done rendering way back in the day, but nothing like this. So Pixar Renderman is what we started with. We got that going. I'll just go ahead and flip forward. This is what the students were doing at first, working on iMac or working on Macs and doing it on the desktop and rendering these images, taking hours and hours. And what we came up with was a scripted way of them doing it on Arc. And so that's what it looked like on the left. I heard several students say this was the scary interface. We had the students SSHing into the high-performance computing system, just like a computer scientist would. And it worked, but it wasn't ideal. This same image was just generated in like a minute. This is what HPC looks like in the rack. That's a bunch of Dell servers in a data center. And these are the things we learned kind of we needed to do differently going forward. In 2019, we brought Meredith on board, and she said, we really need to kind of reset this. And Ben said, yeah, our students need more graphical experience. So we, at the same time, pivoted from Pixar Renderman output to Maya Arnold rendering engine on the back end. And so I worked on containerizing that and making sure it worked. Got with Robert, he helped me with some of the containerization stuff, and moving to On Demand, which was the web interface part of it. This is what it looked like before. They would design their stuff on the desktop, upload it, run the scripting, download the files, and then they would have their rendered output like that. And so, but one student came to me, I said, is this useful to you at all? And she cried. She said, yes. She said, I get my weekends back. I said, what do you mean? She said, I used to have to go into the DAS lab and start the rendering and babysit it until, I'd have to have 5 machines. And if I left the building, someone else would log in and all my work would be gone. She said, so being able to do this, I can go home, I can render from McDonald's or wherever, and I don't have to worry about people kicking me off and losing all my work. So she said, I don't have to sleep the weekend at the DAS lab anymore. So that was really cool. But, and I worked with, there's Dong Su on the left, checking some of our rendering output. There's me giving a workshop on telling the students how it worked. But the next step was really to take it to this. So this is what the interface looks like now. They log into On Demand. They click on the interface. They upload their content. They hit launch the render, and then they watch their job complete. And they can come back to it whenever they want. And then they just download the images. And I think that's it. Was that 2 minutes? All right, that's it.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was really, thank you for doing that so quickly. Tweaks, I know that wasn't easy. I'm just going to go back to the beginning so you can see everybody's names when we ask questions. But I just want to say thank you to everybody that worked on this. It's really been a joy to see the students working on it finally. It was a long way. It was kind of a long road to get here, but it's really pays off once you see the students' work. So yeah, so now I'm going to give it back to Phyllis and let you guys ask questions.
So a quick reminder, if you're online, please use the questions box and we'll get your questions here. What questions do we have in the room? First, let me just say, what a cool, the vocabulary in this presentation. Did everyone understand? If you raise your hand if you didn't understand any word, some word during it. Something in there was a new word. I know that I wrote down, like, there's HPC and SSH and rendering and ARC, and I don't know what a lot of that stuff is. But I love that we're using the language of all these different disciplines together to create this project. So what questions do you all have? I'll come to you with the mic.
Well, first, two things. I wanted to say how incredibly happy this presentation makes me. And I wanted to thank Meredith, because she's thanked everybody else, but I just wanted to thank Meredith for carrying this forward. This is absolutely terrific. And then I had a question for the students, which is, and Tweaks kind of hinted at it a little bit, but how hard is this for you to use? Is this something, why would you use your home computer or your PC rather than this? Because this is maybe too hard to do something. And a follow-on on that question is, what do you think it would take to get the undergrads in CT or frankly, I would love cinema to start using this. So what do you think the barriers are to really start getting a lot of people using this?
Oh, just so you know, the undergrads are using it too. But I don't know. These guys were the most enthusiastic, and so they're the three that are up here. But I'll send you guys images of the undergrads' work, because it's also fantastic. So yeah, I have 26 students using it right now. So
I'll say when I render this 3D animation just on my laptop, first thing is it's slow. And when I render it, I can't touch my laptop. I can't work on other things. I can do homework or do other things on my laptop. So Art Render Farm really helps me with that process. And also Render Farm is a lot faster. So I'm very grateful to have that through this school.
Yeah, to add on her answer, when I render on my computer, the computer runs a little bit more, and it gets hotter and louder. And just like she said, you cannot do anything else. But with the HPC computer, all we do is we log in using that interface. We put our jobs there, and then we click render, we go away, and then we get an email sent to us said, your job started. And we just check to see if all the images have rendered. And so when we come back, we just download it. The only issue is the translation between my computer and the distant computer. So if there's some kind of a break in the server with the connection, that's the only issue we have at the moment. Other than that, we don't have any other, personally, I don't have any other issue with it because it's working flawlessly for me.
That's a pretty simple answer for me. I can play video games while it's rendering. So couldn't get better.
What other questions? I'm going to come here.
I have a boring question. Who's paying for all this?
Good question.
No, that's actually a great question. There's two parts of that answer. First, I am in IT as well, and so we are generally funded for hardware purchases through the state of Virginia through the ETF fund, so Education Technology Fund. So that's where all the hardware comes from. Me personally, where I'm paid is just through overhead off of grants. And there, there's a couple of us. We have, well, currently there's 5 computer scientists like myself, and then, a whole slew of sysadmins and stuff to keep things running. But all that comes more off of overhead from grants.
And keep in mind the HPC is equivalent to several thousand laptops, I'd say, if you had to equate it. And researchers are paying for access to the HPC, and their funds go into the, what's the name of the fund? The compute fund? The hardware fund. You know about it, Ben. You're part of that group. So the researchers pay for the hardware, and you guys are using under 1% of our leftover cycles. So we have leftover cycles when researchers aren't paying to use for genetic research, cancer research, virology, stuff like that. There's leftover compute cycles. So you guys are just using those leftover compute cycles, so it's really costing us nothing. The equivalent, if you were to do this in the cloud, would cost about 3 cents per CPU hour. That's very hard to equate, but it ends up to a few dollars use for large render jobs. But that's all free because we're using leftover compute cycles from HPC.
I saw a question over here.
You have to hold it? Okay, great.
If you start giving me trouble, I'll take it away.
Okay, Phyllis. Yes, ma'am. Hey, so thanks everybody for doing this. This is really a huge opportunity for students in creative technologies. And I was just wondering, what more can we get out of this? Blender, Adobe, After Effects?
What apps?
Thanks.
Good question. Thank you.
Blender's already on there, isn't it?
So this might be my more favorite question. What can we do next? So just thinking about this, we could scale this. So right now it takes a minute to do however many frames or whatever. We can make it faster. One of the things that I heard one of the students say is they would log in every once in a while to see if their job was done. I mean, we can automate stuff like that. Send you an email when, so we can improve the student's life a little bit. But you're right. What other software tools? Some of the ones that you've mentioned are licensed, so we'd have to, figure that out. But anything like that is possible, and it's just a matter of figuring out what the software needs to be installed. Is it a license? Is it just a simple install? Is it open source? Whatever. One of the things that I was asking is, once you've rendered this, I think students are now downloading it back to their laptop or whatever. Maybe that's something that we can get some sort of visual tool on our clusters so that data's there, it stays there, front and back. So what happens up front? What do you guys do to set up what needs to be rendered? Maybe that's the tool that needs to be there so that you're not doing that transfer step, and then look at it at the end. So yeah, the Open On Demand project is all about that question. What all can we do with this by enabling users to use them in a different way?
The question is, who pays for the licenses?
Yeah, now you're asking the hard question. Unknown. We have some software, but licensed software is just hard. And I can give you some examples of where the department paid for it, and we just host. So, there's some chemistry softwares that are like that. MATLAB, we now have a site license, but you still pay for access.
So in these projects, we start off with Pixar Renderman, and going through the legal process of getting software licensed on campus is, I didn't realize I was new at the time. I just did it, and they said, Tweaks, you can't do that. So I had to get like a get out of jail card from legal to do this once. So I got Pixar Renderman working like that using an educational license, which was free. But if you click on I agree on Virginia Tech campus, it has to go through legal. So we got that working, and then when y'all decided you wanted to pivot to Maya Renderman, they were already running their own Maya licensing server, luckily. So we just pointed the cluster at that licensing server, So they maintain the software and the licensing, and we just point to it. So likewise, if you have a licensing server, you let us know, and we can kind of allow the cluster to point to it and talk to it.
Excellent. You can hold on to it. Thank you so much. We are at time. So I just want to thank everybody for coming again. Hope that you will join us next week. Next week's topic as the CCI Tesseract. We will be in the Cube next week. So you can come here, but there won't be donuts and coffee here. It'll be at the Cube. And if you're online, you can join us just where you joined us this time. Also, if you signed up for PDN credit today and I don't already know your name, if you would just check in with me to make sure that I check you off. Thank you all for coming. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.